welcome back. It's really nice to see you all. I hope everybody's winter break was restful, and I hope the new year is off to a good start. Akemashite omedetou gozaimasu. Um, I'm just gonna go back and share my screen again. So we can start discussing the fourth section of the Confessions of Lady Nijō. I hope you have been enjoying it. Um, Lots of really fun stuff, very different stuff started happening in this section. So I'm really excited to hear everybody's thoughts and whatnot. So just we've been away for a little while, so I just wanted to refresh our memories of what I want you all to be thinking about while we discuss this work. Namely, can we analyze Towazugatari the same way we do Heian period works? How does Lady Nijō pay tribute to her genre while also transforming it? What reasons could there be for the lack of reception history? And then how trustworthy is Lady Nijō as an author? Um, so, okay, so we had some really interesting things happening this section. Lady Nijō leaves the capital at moonrise to go off on her many pilgrimages. She travels all around. She is inspired by one of her favorite writers, the priest poet Saigyo, who I'm going to talk a little bit about later so that we all have context for him. But she starts contemplating the feelings of lower born people, which is kind of unique in aristocratic literature of this sort. There is the scene where she is passing by beautiful cherry blossoms and she sees peasants admiring them, and she starts thinking, hey, I wonder if they actually can admire this as much as I can. And then there's another beautiful scene where she meets prostitutes who are playing musical instruments, namely the biwa and the koto, and they can see that she's quite upset, and then they start exchanging poetry. Um, so her worldview is very much expanding now. She goes to a lot of famous places like Yatsuhashi, the Eight Bridges, and the Sumida River, and other places. A lot of these places she visits are not only places that her favorite poet, Saigyo, went to, but they're also very famous in literature, namely in the Ise Monogatari, or the Tales of Ise, which is a very famous early Heian period text. We unfortunately are not going to read it ever in this group because it's not necessarily written by a woman, but I do highly recommend everybody to read it on their own because I'm reading it right now. It's very beautiful, and then also because it's so famous, it's very influential on a lot of the literature that we will be reading. Um, so yeah, she goes here, and she even mentions explicitly um, events in the Ise Monogatari and the Tales of Ise when she's at these places. We also see one of the early depictions of the shogun and the kind of warrior class government that is new in the beginning of the Kamakura period. We have depictions of like a procession of the shogun and people like that, and we start seeing that world or that side of the world of medieval Japan. And then she also has several chance meetings with her ex-lover Gofukaksa as well, even though she's trying to kind of separate herself. So a lot happens here. This picture, or this painting, I should say, um, kind of has nothing to do with the story because, as we know, there wasn't really a reception history, but I wanted to share it because this is a depiction of the clothes that a nun would wear, a Buddhist nun would wear around this time. Lady Nijō probably wouldn't have looked quite as nice because she was a traveling nun, so she'd be a little bit, her robes would be a little bit more tattered, they'd be a little bit more, rather, a little bit less billowy. Saigyo lived at the end of the Heian period. His dates are roughly 1118 to 1190, and he was born Fujiwara no Norikiyo. He was of the warrior class, and he was a favored aristocrat of the emperor, and he was very skilled with poetry and I believe also music, and everybody loved him. But kind of like Kaoru in the Tale of Genji, he just really, really wanted to become a priest like his whole life. And unlike Kaoru, though, he was actually able to realize this, and he was able to realize it as early as his early 20s. One source says 23, another one says 25. Um, and it was a little traumatic. He completely cuts his ties, not only to the emperor, his lord, but also his wife and his daughter, who was just 4 at the time. And he is famous because he leaves the capital, and goes on travels all over Japan. For those of you who know Japanese geography a bit, he actually goes all the way up to Hiraizumi, which is in modern day Iwate Prefecture in the Tohoku region. So, like north of Tokyo on your way to Hokkaido. So he goes really far away from the capital. And for context, like the Sumida River, which is located in Tokyo, was seen at this time as the middle of nowhere. And he goes way farther beyond that, into like indigenous territory with the Amishi people and whatnot. Um, and although there was a very big fortress at Hiraizumi that he stays at, but these travels of his were also broken up with periodic breaks where he would go back to the capital. His travels happened around a time that was very tumultuous in Japanese history, because at the end of the Heian period, there was this clan called the Taira that tried taking over, and all of literature describes them as these barbaric tyrants. And the first time he returns to the capital from his travels, the Taira are in full power, and the emperor has been exiled, and all of his friends are dead, and their houses are destroyed. But while he's at the capital during this stay, the Taira actually get completely demolished by the Genji during the Genpei War, and this is when the Kamakura period begins, and um, the Kamakura shogunate is established. So a lot of Saigyo's poetry, although he was famous before becoming a priest, a lot of his poetry that is very famous came after he became a priest. Um, his wife and daughter also entered religion. They became nuns, and the Koyasan temple complex in Wakayama that's very famous. And Saigyo was hugely popular in pre-modern Japan. He inspired tons of people, not only Lady Nijō, but also the nun Abutsu, who wrote a very famous diary that we may read in this group in the future. And also Matsuo Basho, the very famous 17th century haiku poet. And of course, Basho is also famous for his haibun, or his travel poetry journals, like the Oku no Hosomichi, or Road to the North. And Basho's travel literature would go on to inspire a lot of people, but Basho himself was inspired by Saigyo initially. And a lot of the places that he visited that became really famous with him prior to that were famous because of Saigyo. So that's about it. I just wanted to give some context for him. And then the one other thing that I'd like to mention is I wanted to give you an example of one of his poems. Saigyo is included in the famous 100 Poems by 100 Poets collection, the Ogura Hyakunin Isshu. His poem is number 86, so it's towards the end, but it's very beautiful. I'll let you have a moment to read it, and I can read it in Japanese. It's Nageke tote, tsukiya wa mono o omowasuru, kakochi ga o naru, waga namida kana. And so it's kind of depressing in a sense, but it's filled with a lot of Buddhist sentiment, and whatnot. He talks a lot about the moon um, in his poetry. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I wanted to mention for the presentation.